3 o'clock. And for those that set their phones for Shema time, will you say it with me? Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuto Leolam Vayed. We add to that Shalom Yerushalayim. Hello, House of David family, and all those that would be joining us via Facebook Live or YouTube Live. I think YouTube has more visits, but if you're watching on Facebook, please let us know that you're doing so. Today's Torah portion is called Yitro. Normally in the King James Version, Jethro, and the name Yitro means abundance. I'm going to be reading in just a moment from the book of Exodus, or Shemot, chapter number 19, verse 3 through 8. So you want to go ahead and turn there and be ready. I want to announce something other to you first. Excuse me. Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday night, January 25th, 7 p.m., at House of David. Yes, at House of David. We're going to have a live audience. We're finally going to get to return to our place of worship, and I very much look forward to being there with you. Please make plans now. Clear out your schedule. Don't let anything get in your way. Be there Tuesday night, 7 p.m. We have our special guest. It's been a couple of years now since we've been able to have him, Hanok Young, our licensed tour guide friend from Modi'in, Israel. And he will be sharing with us, as far as I know, is Israel's future your future? He has been on tour and is on tour throughout the nation at present. And it's because of COVID restrictions and travels, we've not been able to be with him for a while. So we're looking forward to you being there with us. Come early and come expecting something good to be shared to you. And our House of David family, when you're there, I want you to be ready to share a love gift with him. We want to powerfully encourage him and support him and let him know how much he's loved here in the States. So especially from the House of David, we want to let him know that we support him. So please be prepared to be there. Bring your gift, bring your heart, bring your ears, and we look forward to seeing you. I can't wait to see you again. So that being said, Shemot, or Exodus, chapter number 19, and let's begin with verse number 3 and read through verse number 8. And Moshe went up to Elohim. Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, This is what you're to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, big word here, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my command, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh had commanded him. Verse 8 says that all the people answered together and said, All that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. My thought today is, who are these people? Who is this large, numerous group of people camping out in the middle of nowhere at the foot of the base of Mount Sinai, also known as Mount Horeb? In February 2017, a number of years ago, Laura and I were in Mesa, Arizona, attending a B'nai Yosef of North America Leadership Conference. Big and important event. when we were attending there, we were also blessed at that time to have Dr. Sakina. Many of you know him, most of you know him. We were blessed to have him join us. He was offering to us his wise counsel, and he was guiding our efforts at presenting protocol to the representatives of the local native peoples. We had a protocol ceremony, and he kind of guided us through that so that we would do so correctly. Very important, very powerful, very impacting event. During one of our sessions where our leadership was in a large room, gathered around tables, we had 4 or 5 people or so, maybe 6 people around these round tables situated through the room. And in the middle of each of these tables was a plate of fruit, orange slices and grapes and nuts and those kinds of things, fruits and nuts. And we were reaching in and just taking a piece with our hands. This is, of course, pre-COVID era. And we were sharing and working on projects together in small groups. Dr. Sakina entered the room, and having seen what we were doing, he told us of a vision that he had received sometime previously. And he said, in this vision, there was a large banquet hall with tables, and in the middle of the tables was various fruits. And he said, non-native people were seated at the tables, and they were eating the fruit with their hands, not using any utensils, exactly what we were doing. And he said, around the walls, looking on, were native people. They were looking and watching, but they were not participating. He said then that the people at the tables began to sing a song that many of you learned in Sunday school or something of that nature years ago. It says, he brought me to his banqueting table. His banner over me is love. You remember that? My kids do. He brought me to his banqueting table. His banner over me is love. You remember that song? Well, the native people, or the non-native people were singing this song. The natives began to sing a different version. They began singing, he brought me to his banqueting hall. His banner over me is love. They didn't make it to the table. They were just around the walls of the hall. Those non-native peoples at the table then began to wave and to motion for the natives to come and join them at the table and eat the fruit with them. And when they did so, there were no natives left standing at the wall, but everybody was seated at a table together. And that's a beautiful vision of how that Yah wants to incorporate and bring together his people, his various ethnicities and cultures and languages and races of peoples, and bring them to the same table to eat together and be one body. Now we hear something similar being preached, promoted, proclaimed from our society. Much is being said about the words inclusion or tolerance or acceptance. These are demands from a society that demands the erasure of boundaries and proprieties. These voices, while they're promoting everybody should be a part and included, at the same time, they turn and project shame on anyone who would dare to draw a line, who would dare to enforce a rule that would keep score and actually reward the winners, keeping scores enough that you know who the winners are. This concept of inclusion is not so much about making someone feel a part of the group, but rather forcing the group to recreate their identity, to become something else that includes those who would otherwise not belong. In other words, this agenda of inclusion, tolerance, and acceptance says you are not allowed to have an identity that does not include me, even if I'm totally against what you are. Now that's the societal shift that we're currently in. The Daily Wire, just the other day, on the 20th of this month, reported that even M&M, Mars, the candy manufacturers, M&M characters, you've seen the little M&M characters as cartoons like on television commercials. There was an outcry about how that they were being depicted. Two of the M&Ms were presented as being feminine, one wearing boots and the other one wearing high heels. Not making this up, folks. But they're changing the characters in their commercials to reflect, and this is their quote, a global commitment to creating a world where everyone feels they belong and society is inclusive. So they're going to shorten the heels on one of them so that she appears as the boss, but not bossy. And the other character that is wearing boots that they said comes across as being overtly sexual is going to have her boots replaced with sneakers. A further quote said, these changes are meant to increase a sense of belonging for 10 million people around the world by 2025, according to Mars. Now, I don't know what 2025 might be as far as an agenda might be. Maybe you know. But it's all about even M&Ms. I mean, how non-issue can M&Ms be? But still, I read that and I just had to scratch my head. Now, by comparison, enough of that. By comparison, at Mount Sinai, Yah brings a limited group of people out of Mitzrayim. He did not bring everybody out. Matter of fact, he left most of Israel behind. He brought a limited group out of Mitzrayim. And he says, I brought you on eagle's wings. That is, as a little small eaglet is laid up on the mother's wings and brought to the heights. He rides on mom's wings. He said, I put you on my back, basically, and I miraculously flew you here to this place. In order to establish them as a unique nation, he did not bring them out to make them a nation that would look like everybody else. Intentionally, he wants them to be different than all other nations. He says to them that they will enjoy benefits that not all the other nations will receive. Yah is playing favorites here, intentionally. And he is still seeking out those who will hear his voice, who will turn toward his face and walk in his ways. So when we look at the call of Yahweh by comparison to what world societies are suggesting, he is offering an invitation, but not inclusion. When someone gives you an invitation, the invitation will tell you, this is the time that you're to be there, this is the location where you're to assemble, and oftentimes they'll say, this is the manner of dress that is expected. They will tell you what the purpose of the invitation is for. And so there are guidelines that you need to adhere to in order to accept and take advantage of the invitation. But they're probably not going to be standing at the door and saying, everybody come in. If you will remember the parable that Yeshua taught about the wedding feast, that those that were originally invited made excuses as to why they couldn't come. So he said, Go to the highways, go to the hedge bushes, go look for people and bring them in. But even among those that were not originally invited, that were then given the invitation to come, he found one that was not dressed in a wedding garment. And he said, "Friend, how did you get in here?" And he cast him out. Well, the point of that is, even if you are the second wave of the invited, you still need to adhere to the protocols of the invitation. His call is for set apartness, not tolerance. The world says, whatever you are, however you are, whatever you do, however you live, whatever choices you make, no one should be allowed to say anything about it. No one should be able to treat you any differently because of it. You must be, you have to be, it is demanded that you be accepted no matter what. But Yah says, if you're coming to be my people, you must be set apart. We'll talk more about that later on. And thirdly, he says, my call is acceptance within the boundaries. Yah establishes the boundaries. He is not promoting acceptance without boundaries. Our world says acceptance, no boundaries considered. Yah says, I'm willing to accept you within the boundaries that I have established. Now I want to look at these three identifiers that Yah uses in this text and describes who we are. This is who he is calling you and I to be. Number one, he is calling us to be a treasured possession. Number two, he is calling us to be a kingdom of priests. And then number three, he is calling us to be a set apart or holy nation. So let's take the first one. Yah says that you and I are to be a treasured possession. Now, if you're taking notes and you want to write this word down, the Hebrew word that is used here to translate the idea of a treasured possession, it's only one word, segula. We would transliterate that as an S-E, maybe an apostrophe, G-U-L-L-A. S-E-G-U-L-L-A, segula. The word is that which describes a valuable property, a jewel, something that you highly esteem. Now, it may not have any other value in anyone else's eyes, but to you, it is a priceless possession. And it is your note of worth on it that makes it valuable. So obviously, as Yah's people, we may not be considered unique or valuable or in any way distinct from anyone else. But when Yah looks at us, he deems a value upon his people. The King James Version translates segula as the word peculiar. A peculiar possession. So the word peculiar, its primary translation or definition is not ordinary, unusual, odd, weird, and strange. How many people do you know that have justified their behavior by quoting the King James Version of that word and professing that their strange and even weird actions and manners only mean that they are the elect of God? Well, it's not the primary definition of the word peculiar, but it is the secondary definition that would apply here. The older version or older definition of the word peculiar, it means belonging distinctively or primarily to one person, group, or kind. It is the one who is special and the one who is unique, not the one that's weird. So Yah is not calling you and I to be a weird people for him. Now, that may disappoint some of you. And maybe that kind of deflates you a little bit. But you're not justified in your strange behavior. We are to be identified as uniquely the possession of the Most High. And Psalms chapter 135 and verse 4, it says, "For Yah has chosen Yaakov for himself, Israel for his segula," his treasured possession. There is a commentary called Chazat Zion or Chazat Zion commentary. It's a rabbinical commentary, and in that, pertaining to this verse in Psalms, it says, quote, "In the dark, bitter exile, when the fortune of the Jews sinks to the depths, he is called Yaakov, which alludes to Jewish oppression under the heel of tyranny. At that time, God's full name is abbreviated to Yah." So when I read to you, "For Yah has chosen Yaakov," that's just not unique to a translation. It's in the Torah that way, or in the Tanakh that way. Continuing, "Nevertheless, even in that period of adversity, Yah prefers the downtrodden Jews above all other nations, for they remain his chosen people." Now what that's saying is that when the Jews, or when Israel is in exile, away and outside the land, Yah calls them Yaakov because, like Yaakov, they're under a time of tyranny. Under more optimal circumstances, it continues, when the Jews enjoy the sanctity of dwelling in the Holy Land, they merit the title Israel, a term denoting triumph over evil and adversity. But the point here is, whether we're in exile and suffering under oppression and tyranny, or whether we're Israel living in the land and free from these things, either way, we're still chosen. We're still the treasured possession of the Most High. What that says to us is our circumstances, good or bad, do not determine our chosenness. When everything is going wonderful, when all things are free and easy, it's easy then to say, I am the beloved of Yah. But when you're under a hard issue, when trial is upon you, it's in those moments that you want to throw up your hands and say, he must have forgotten me. No. Whether you're living as Yaakov or whether you're living as Israel, you're still his treasured possession. Either way. Now, Yah has indeed paid an exorbitant price for us. Spare not even the life of his own son. For it says in the book of Titus, chapter 2, and verse 14, quote, "Who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to cleanse for himself a people, his own segula," his own possession, ardent for good works. In other words, this possession that Yah has, he paid for it. He didn't demand and take it. You're not stolen. You're bought. You're paid for. He deemed you so worthy of whatever price was required that he redeemed you for himself. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. Kefa says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation." And here he uses that phrase again, a segula, a people for possession, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Verse 10 says, "Who were once not a people, but now the people of Elohim, who have not obtained compassion, but now obtain compassion." Now, what's that all about? You go back to the book of Hosea, the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, and you will find that Yah has determined that because of the sins of the 10 northern tribes of Israel, they were to be cast off and scattered, that they would no longer have his mercy and no longer called his people. And that happened. They had been scattered for 2,700 years. Maybe we could say we have been scattered for 2,700 years. But those that were determined you are no longer going to have compassion, he said, there is a time that I will return to you and return you back to myself. And upon those that I have not shown compassion, I will now have compassion. And upon those that I said, you're no longer my people, I will call you my people. In other words, through the work of Yeshua, our Messiah, those that were cast off, he said, I did not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Matthew chapter 15. So we understand this redemptive process of Yeshua in our behalf is to restore compassion, possession, and identity to us because he deemed us valuable, even when we were sinful in our lifestyles. He still saw the value in us. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 13 and 14, it says that we have been given the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, that is a seal upon us for this promise. It says, who is the pledge of our inheritance unto the redemption of the Segula, the purchased possession. This people, this possession, this valuable item, this jewel that Yah believes us to be, he has said, I have given you the Holy Spirit. I have put my Spirit in you to indicate that I am going to give you also the inheritance. I didn't just call you because I liked the way you looked or because of the number of how many you are, but I determined that you're my possession, and I'm going to put my possession where they are in safekeeping, and that is in the land. If I have a valuable in my home, I'm going to keep it where I know where it's at, and I'm going to keep it where it's safe. As the possession, the treasured possession of the Most High, he is going to put us back in the land of Israel where he knows where we are and where he will keep us safe. And I can say hallelujah for that. 3 times in the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, we are told that we are Yah's treasured possession. In Devarim chapter 7, verse 6, it says, for you are a set apart people to Yahweh your Elohim. Yahweh your Elohim has chosen you to be a people for himself, a segula, a treasured possession above all peoples on the face of the earth. Now, this is spoken in context in regards to Israel being separate from the pagan nations that lived around them. You are to be unique, you are to be distinct, you are to be set apart, you are to be separate from them because you are my treasured possession. Devarim chapter 14 and verse 2 repeats this word for word, the exact same quote. This time, it's in regards to the foods that we will accept as being clean and those that we reject because they're unclean. So those that are the treasured possession of Yah, if you look there, he is saying to us, because of your dietary adherence to my commands, I see you as my treasured possession. If you want to know what those foods are, go to the book of Leviticus. Chapter number 11? I started to say chapter number 23, but that's the, chapter number 11, Leviticus chapter number 11. Now, he also says in the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 16 and 17. Then shall those who fear Yahweh speak to one another, and Yahweh listens and hears, and a book of remembrance be written before him of those who fear Yahweh and those who think upon his name. Dr. Sakina again gives a wonderful, incredible teaching about those who think on the name of Yud, He, Vav, He. Matter of fact, I have that book. It took me a moment to find it. I have this book, His Glorious Names. This helps you daily to think about his names every day. Every chapter is a name of Yah, and it's broken down for you. So, Dr. Sakina, I'm plugging your book for you, brother. If you don't have this book, you need this book. Thinking upon his name gets your name written in his book. Verse 17, and they shall be mine. Who? Those who think upon my name and are written in my book. They shall be mine, says Yahweh of hosts, on the day that I prepared a treasured possession. The King James says, when I make up my jewels. In native understanding, Yah wears regalia. He has those garments that speak of his majesty and his set apartness and his role as the creator, and on the identity of all that he is and wears. It describes him. It was understood in royalty settings, those who were sovereigns, that they would select certain jewels to be included in their regalia, in their garments. Yah is looking to us as his treasured possession, to be jewels that he will take up and make a part of his garments in that day. Where is he going to find these? These are the jewels that he finds in the book of remembrance from those who think and ponder and consider and meditate on his name. That's a bit overwhelming. Secondly, we are to be a reign of priests. Now, this involves discussion of government by necessity, according to the scriptures. I am not going to be political. I'm not trying to be political and promote one agenda or the other. But we are going to discuss the idea of government for a moment. The word that is used here, or the phrase that is used here, is memleket kohanim. Memleket. It is the idea of kingdom and sovereignty and dominion. It's the idea of who has authority and is in ruling position, a kingdom. Memleket kohanim, the word kohanim is where we translate the word priest. And a priest is one who functions as an intercessor and who also moves in the courts and the environments of the Most High, serving him. So it's the one who intercedes and who serves, who has the ability to connect the physical realm and the spiritual realm and the obedience of their prescribed protocols and duties. Now, consider government. Our great American experiment has lasted so far for over 240 years. I believe this year is 246 since we declared our independence from England. And we've heard recently, and I've heard this phrase over and over again in news articles and media, that many people are, especially in the halls of Congress, they are expressing concern or fear that our democracy is being threatened by someone of an opposite viewpoint. And everybody's guilty of it. And so there's this idea being promoted from our governmental personnel that says that we are a democracy, and our democracy is under attack by however they view that being done. Well, the reality is we are not a democracy. Maybe that's a shock to you, but we are not a democracy in America, and thank you, Yah, that we are not. We are better understood to be a constitutional republic. What that means is we elect representatives to attend the halls of our legislatures and senates and halls of representatives, House of Representatives, to represent us. We give individuals our consent that you go and represent us either at a state, local, or national level. Now, our constitutional republic is indeed based on democratic ideas, but they're not one and the same. A democracy simply says the majority rules. And you think about that, and you will realize why we should be glad that we are not a democracy. With a democracy, we have the threat of what's called the tyranny of the majority, which means that if the majority enacts a law, we have no guarantee of the rights for the minority. Whatever the larger numerical group might be, they can enact a law that says that the minority now must serve them without compensation. And because they're outvoted, the minority have no voice. In such a state of rule, then, the majority can enact laws that punish the minority and also exempt themselves. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, and may his memory be a blessing for us, he stated that the standard works on the history of political thought will trace the ideas of politics back to, quote, Plato's Republic, Aristotle's Politics, and the Greek city-state, especially that of Athens. But, he says, this is a serious error. He then notes that our founding fathers here in America, they were not looking to Plato or Aristotle, but rather to the Hebrew Bible for an understanding as to how to set up our government. So our version of a constitutional republic is more about reflecting Hebrew thought expressed at Mount Sinai, at least in its original concept. We, I think, have deviated from that a bit. But the ideas that they had was founded upon scriptures more than Aristotle and Plato. Long before, he says, long before the Greek philosophers, and far more profoundly at Mount Sinai, the concept of a free society was born. So the idea of personal liberty and personal rights does not come from the Greeks nor the Romans. It comes from this book. It is the Torah, the first 5 books of Scripture, that establishes government that seeks for righteousness and justice for everybody. Those are the 2 tenets of the entire Scripture, that we walk righteously and that we see that justice is offered for everyone, regardless of position or economic status, regardless of race or name. You see no one's face. You hear the cause. You hear the cry, and you grant justice. Righteousness and justice is for everybody, as the whole nation is comprised of a people who walk in covenant with Yahweh their Elohim. Now, as long as the people will faithfully, this is what this word "if" here says, and verse number 5, if you diligently obey my voice and guard my covenant. As long as the people faithfully walk before Yah, according to his commands, the general welfare and good of everybody is assured. It's when you and I seek to rule without faithfully obeying our Creator that our laws become skewed in favor of the powerful, and then justice is trampled underfoot. That means that the poor are going to be oppressed, and the vast majority of the people are literally going to become legally enslaved by some decreed means to those who have authority over them. I think we can say that not just in our nation, but in nations around the world, that those who were placed to favorably rule over us have taken the power of the majority within the ranks of the minority by title and position, and they seek to rule over us oppressively. How did this happen? We left off from the values and the tenets of righteousness and justice. We had deviated from this book, and because we've done so, the people suffer. Our Constitution, its preamble says this: we, the people of the United States, not we, the rulers, not we, the elect few, but a people, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. That's a Torah quality. The perfection of this union would be that of righteousness. Ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. We started out right. Yesterday, as I read those lines, I also began to read through the Constitution of our United States. And I saw the forethought and the wisdom and the careful planning and determination that these men who helped found this nation went through in order to create an entity that would be unique in the earth. We have a great need that we pray that our nation return to our earlier values, that we return to the cries for righteousness and justice. Now, the Torah establishes government in this manner. It requires that a king write their own personal copy of this Torah in their own hand, that they keep it with them all the days of their lives, and that they read it and they study it all the days of their lives. That this Torah get into their being and not fail to be in their mouths. The Torah says that if a king walks contrary to the Torah and begins to disobey it, he is to be challenged and corrected by the prophets. So a king does not have absolute rule. There's a balance of powers here, and that is that a prophet can come into him and correct him. David took another man's wife, Bathsheba, and Nathan the prophet came into him and corrected him. And to his own credit, David received that correction and repented. It didn't change the circumstances. It didn't alleviate the death of the child that resulted from that taking of her. But he heard the words of the prophet and was broken about it. It then is established in the Torah that moral limits apply to authority and power. And the book of Shemot, or Exodus chapter 19. Again, let's look at verse 3 through 6. Yah says, this is what you're to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel. Verse 5, if you diligently obey my voice and guard my command, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples. You shall be to me a reign of priests and a set apart nation. He said, that's what you're to say to them. Yah is offering to be their Elohim, their mighty one, and to rule over them. But he will not do so without their consent. For he says, offer this to them. This is what you're to say. When Moshe came and called for the elders of the people, he said what Yah had told him. And in verse 8 it says, then the people answered, all that Yahweh has spoken we shall do. So even Yah rules over us by consent. He offered to rule the people and express his terms to them for their acceptance. So we have this principle then. There is no legitimacy of government except by consent of the governed. When one or a group rules over another without their consent, that is tyranny. That's being a despot. That's being a tyrant. That's called oppression. Yah does not authorize tyranny, but rather that the governed give consent to those who rule over them. Having granted dominion of the earth to man, Yah asked man then, here in the form of Am Israel, to consent by covenant agreement to being ruled over him through the offices of those whom he appoints. And this is important. In Yah's government, he alone appoints those that are called. He calls the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherd, pastors, and those who are teachers. He's the one who divides severally among the body as he would the gifts of the Spirit that he would have in operation. He makes those determinations. He makes those choices. We do not elect them. Now, I understand in some denominations they elect or hire their pastor. That's outside of my purview. But originally and scripturally, the man that, or woman, as the case may be, that Yah chooses to operate in a particular office, he appoints. Now, one may say, as I did when I was 18 years old, I have heard Yah's voice and he's called me to preach his word. The local congregation that I was a part of many years ago operated in discernment and agreed that that call was legitimate. They examined my lifestyle. They examined my faithfulness. They examined my capabilities, my willingness to be trained and equipped. And then, having passed their vetting processes and testings, they authorized me with documentation, with license, with ordination, with certificates, acknowledging this is one that has been duly noted as called of the Most High. He is qualified, and therefore we authorize him from our local body or from our body at large. Having walked out of that denomination, I had to find another means, and it was offered to me from another resource. So I still have a credential. Does the piece of paper mean anything? Only to those that would find value in it. But I do what I do, you do what you do, you operate as you do because you believe the Father has laid this upon you, equipped you, and authorize you to do so. But it's not absolute power and authority to operate. It still must be within the lines of moral limitations. And there are those like prophets coming to a king that can offer correction and admonishment, if necessary, reproof or even rebuke. But it's not to drive one out, and it's not to strip them of their capabilities. Rather, it is to declare everything that we do in the government of the Most High is for the purpose of establishing righteousness and mandating or requiring justice for everybody. So the Torah then cannot be that which it is called to be, a document of bondage. The Torah cannot be mere legalism and oppression. It does not imprison those who seek to walk by it, but rather it is the very foundation of our personal liberties and our personal rights and our individual freedoms. When our late leaders the world over, not just here in the United States, but the world over, uses phrases like a new world order or hope and change or build back better, we should discern that the attempt that is being made here is human progress at the expense of what has already been decreed and declared as righteous and just. The whole ideas of what is unknown to us currently as progressivism is that we need to change our foundational understandings of things and move beyond them because, well, they limit us. They are boundaries to us, and we're kicking against those boundaries. We don't want to be limited by those ideals anymore. Sounds good. Sounds like we're trying to free people up even more than they already are. My personal opinion, though, is that we should not be impressed by slogans for change or progressivism as much as those asking for restoration and a return to what is already true. New truth is not true if it is displacing what Yah has already declared to be true. Whether the modern world and its leaders and its governments and its personalities, whether they accept this book or not, this is truth. Matter of fact, all truth is found or founded upon this book. When we operate outside the boundaries of what truth is declared to be here, and we come up with a new, more modern, more progressive version of truth, we're operating in truth that is not true at all. I'm not saying that we can't have a better world and we can't do things in a better way and we can't promote people to a better place. We can. But that's what the Torah tells us to do. To do that at the expense of the personal freedom and liberties that the Torah has already granted to us is not true at all. So what is the kingdom of this kingdom of priests? What's it look like? Let's go to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter number 61. I'm going to switch glasses here. Isaiah 61, the first 6 verses. And Yeshua quoted these words pertaining to himself. The Spirit of the Master Yahweh is upon me because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good news to the meek. This kingdom of priests looks like this. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. And now that does not mean that if we are bound in a prison for legitimate reasons, that we violated the law, that he says, open the cell doors and let them all out. But to those that are enslaved and imprisoned illegitimately, he has come to open those cell doors for us. Verse 2, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn, to appoint unto those who mourn in Sion, to give them embellishment for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garments of praise for the spirit of heaviness. They shall be called the trees of righteousness, a planting of Yahweh to be adorned. In this kingdom of priests, he says, they shall rebuild the old ruins, that is restoration and reclamation. He shall raise up the former waste. They shall restore the ruined cities, the waste of many generations. And strangers shall stand and feed your flocks. The sons of the foreigner be your plowmen and your vine dressers. But you, those of you who are Am Israel, he says, you shall be called priests of Yahweh. Servants of our Elohim shall be said of you. You shall consume the strength of the nations and boast in their esteem. What is that saying? Yah is going to elevate those who are in his kingdom that choose to walk in covenant with him. In the book of Zechariah, also chapter number 6, verse 12 and 13. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, saying, see the man whose name is the branch. The branch refers to the root of Jesse. It is the name of him. The branch here is Zamach, Tzemach, Tzemach, Zamach. This word for the branch, it means one who rules. In Jeremiah chapter 23, his name is called Yahweh Sikenu, Yah our righteousness. This is a reference to Yeshua. This prophecy is being given to Yehoshua, the man in whose name is the branch. Continuing, and from his place he shall branch out, he shall build the Hekel of Yahweh. The word Hekel here is tabernacle or temple. It is he who's going to build the Hekel, or the temple of Yahweh. It is he who's going to bear the splendor, and he shall sit and rule on his throne. It means he's a king, and shall be priest on his throne. And the council of peace shall be between them both. This one that is being prophesied is a king priest, or a priestly king, which means that he operates and functions in both offices, as did Melchizedek or Melchizedek back in the book of Genesis. He is a kingly priest. This references then our Messiah who is coming, the one who is chosen of Yah to rule over the earth in Yah's government. The government that is coming to the earth in the kingdom of the Most High is that is going to be ruled over by one who is both king and priest. He will decree the laws of the Torah and teach the world how to walk in them, which is a kingly function and a priestly function. He will declare the laws, he will teach the laws, he will oversee the offerings that are offered. In the book of Psalms, chapter 132 and verse 9, the word says, let your priests put on righteousness, and your lovingly committed ones shout for joy. When the Torah establishes righteous rule and justice in the earth, people rejoice. Again, it's not bondage, it's not enslavement. It's a time to rejoice. Now, let's finish up in just a few moments here with the idea of our being a holy nation. The phrase here is goy, which means nations, kadosh, which means set apart. It's almost a phrase that it's an oxymoron, because typically in the scriptures, the word goy, or the plural word goyim, nation or nations, they are most often described as being, they can be anti-Semitic, often they're antagonistic against Yahweh. It's the nations that are the ones known to be those who are idolatrous or seeking after idols and worshiping demons. And they are depicted as being oppressors without justice. When the nations would come and invade Israel, as we read about in the history in the scriptures, they would come in and they would oppress and they would rob and they would plunder and they would demand tribute and servitude from Israel. This status as a set-apart nation, this is the status that is the most challenging for us. The idea that we're his treasured possession, that's warm and fuzzy and encouraging to us. The idea that we are to be a governmental structure that offers righteousness and justice, that's a challenge, but that's one that we can meet. If we study his word, walk in his word, we can learn to do that. It's the status as being a set-apart nation that is a problem for us, because it requires us then to be not only individually, but especially corporately, to be a people that is undefiled, separate. That's one of those things that we just don't want to do. We don't want to be unlike everybody else. But he requires us to be undefiled, to be separate, to have abandoned all of our idols, seeking Yah's face alone. Like I said, it's a challenge. It is the call for assimilation, for acceptance, the offering of warm, fuzzy sentiments of inclusion among the nations, the offer that we can be just like everybody else that tempts Israel to leave off from their unique qualities of being the chosen people of Yahweh. I remember when I first started wearing tzitzit, those tassels that are attached to our garments. It was if when I walked into a place of business or somewhere in public, that the whole world stopped and looked and saw that I had these blue and white tassels hanging on my belt loops. I even asked my wife, Laura, one time, "Are you embarrassed to be seen with me when I wear these?" Of course, her response was encouraging. "No, I'm honored that you would wear them." Still, it's not without being asked, "Hey, what's that thing on your belt?" Had one lady ask me one time, "What's that macrame you're wearing?" Macrame? But it's a command of Yah, and it's to create an identity to remind me of who I am, and not to deviate from the path that the Father has laid out for us as his people. In the book of Yitro, or Leviticus chapter 10, verse 3, it says this. Yah says, "By those who come near me, let me be set apart." If you're going to approach him, he says, you must be set apart. He says this again in chapter 11, verse 44. He says, "I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart, for I am set apart." That word, or that phrase, set apart, is the word kadosh. Most often we give it the idea of holy. Holy sometimes, though, ends up being religious. It's not, I want you to be religious because I'm religious. No, I want you to be set apart. You're to be separate. You're to be unique. In the book of Deuteronomy again, Devarim, chapter number 4, let's read verse 5 through 8. Yah says, see, I have taught you laws and right rulings, as Yahweh my Elohim has commanded me to do thus in the land which you go to possess. And you shall guard and do them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the peoples, who hear all these laws, and they shall say, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. For what great nation is there which has Elohim so near to it, as Yahweh our Elohim is to us whenever we call on him? And what great nation is there that has such laws and righteous right rulings like all this Torah which I set before you this day? Sometimes those that are around us appreciate the difference in us more than we appreciate it for ourselves. To be honest with you, those who see us and see our walk are counting on us to maintain that walk, continue that set apart status, because it's for that they offer respect and a sense of dignity to us. And they're looking for someone that can do that, because it then gives them hope that they likewise can walk that way. It's when we let down our guard and start walking just like everybody else that suddenly the realization is, well, they're not who I thought they were. This week, while we were praying, and let me just insert this here, for those that are part of our prayer stream, thank you so much for your prayers. Thank you so much for taking on an hour, whether you pray the whole hour or not, most of the hour, but you're praying during a particular hour of the day. Right now, we're covering somewhere around 13 to 15 hours out of the day in prayer, praying over the needs of those that are sick, those that have family issues, and wearing themselves out caring for their parents, etc. We posted a need for some friends of ours who lives in Fresno, California. And among those needs, a dear friend, Wendy, was suffering with extreme pain in her body, especially in her back. And I encouraged you to pray against the shingles virus that was laying dormant at the cellular level in her body, and that was causing her pain. It came to me later on in prayer that it is an ambusher. This virus that is laying dormant in her body and flaring up and causing pain, it's like it's ambushing her. We started praying. You started praying over her. We got a text message last night that there's been a dramatic difference. There's been aches, there's been pain, but for 24 hours, she said she's not had that intense, debilitating pain. Keep praying until we see complete and total healing. Absolute and total healing. So your prayers are working. But it was while I was praying, in my time that I had, a couple, 3 days ago, I was praying about those that were suffering with the COVID virus. And I asked the Father, where is this line of distinction? Where those that are your people, why are they getting COVID? Why is there not a distinguishing line that says those who walk contrary to me suffer from this virus, and those who are my people, they do not? We see that in the plagues in Israel, or the plagues that liberated Israel from Mitzrayim or Egypt. Where is that at now? Why is there no line of distinction? Why, and further, why have so many righteous people died from this virus? Before I give you the answer that he gave me, I didn't like the answer, and you probably won't either. But what the Father spoke in my spirit was, and I quote, there can be no line of distinction without separation from the world. My people want to be syncretized with the world instead of being separate from it. He's called us to be a set-apart nation, a corporate body, not just individuals, but a corporate body that is set apart to him. Much of what claims to be such also yearns to be identified appreciably by the world around them. We just do not comfortably want to make whatever changes are required of us to be a set-apart nation. It's a challenge, but it's one that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is going to help us to meet. In closing, Yeshua taught us this. This is how you're to pray. Your kingdom come, your rule and authority. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When Yeshua comes and brings his kingdom, there will be a set-apart nation in the earth known as Am Israel. And it will be unique, it will be different, it will be set apart and remain so. So to that prayer, we also pray what Yah said the priest should pray. Arise, O Yah, and let your enemies be scattered. Let those who hate you flee from before you. And return, O Yah, to the countless thousands of Israel. May he do that. May he establish us as this people. Who are these people? We're the treasured possession, the segula of Yahweh. We are a governmental corporate body who looks for righteousness and justice in the earth based upon the personal liberties and freedoms that this book guarantees. And we will become and are becoming a set-apart nation. A nation. Again, not just individuals, but a nation that is set apart to him. And may we see this take place, may we see this take place in our day. Will you pray with me? Yivarekaka Yahweh, Vayishmareka, Yair Yahweh Panabileka, Vikuneka, Isa Yahweh Panabileka, Vyasimleka, Shalom. And may Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and be gracious and favorable to you. May Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you, and he may give you shalom. If you're watching and know the words, sing with me. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Amen. Don't forget, Tuesday night, 7 o'clock at House of David. The weather's going to be good. The roads are going to be clear. Our bodies are going to be healed. We're going to come rejoicing with our ears open, our hearts receptive, with a love gift for Hanok. And I look forward to seeing you there and fellowshipping with you. Come early, and we'll see you then. Shabbat Shalom.